If you are just joining us, former President Gerald Ford has died at the age of 93. He was the 38th President of the United States. He served from August 9th, 1974, when President Nixon resigned, until January of 1977, when Jimmy Carter took office. Joining us now is our senior economics reporter, Steve Leisman, with insight into President Ford's economic legacy. Steve?
Erin, it was a remarkably consequential presidency for such a short one. I have on my lapel here a button, the Whip Inflation Now campaign, that a lot of people ridicule. But when you go back and look at it and you start to understand the times that it happened in, well, maybe you can credit President Gerald Ford with
In case you are just joining us, former President Gerald Ford has died. Installed as the 38th President of the United States following the Watergate scandal, Mr. Ford served his country for nearly 60 years in public office. He was 93 years old when he passed away, the longest living president in U.S. history. We have a fascinating story on Ford and the market coming up later. Two things to let you know about right now. First, there will be a moment of silence here at the New York Stock Exchange to honor President Ford at 9:30, and at 11 a.m., opening bell just on the other side of this brief break. Plus, a special tribute to President Ford right here on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. That is next. Welcome back to a special opening bell ceremony here at the New York Stock Exchange on this Wednesday, December 27th. The exchange will be honoring the passing of Gerald Ford with 2 minutes of silence before the trading day begins. We're going to hear one opening bell, then there will be the moments of silence, 2 minutes as we said. Then you will hear another bell, and that is when trading will actually ensue here on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Gerald Ford, a president with a big story when it comes to the markets. He inherited the markets 1 month after he took office. The Dow hit its all-time low of 577. That was the market he had inherited, so it was certainly a tough time for Gerald Ford. We're going to have a lot more on the market impact of the former president. An amazing story as it pertains to New York City. Gerald Ford, keep in mind, was the 38th president of the United States. He took the reins after Nixon resigned, and of course following him was Jimmy Carter, who took office in January of 1977. And you just heard the second bell. The markets have now opened here on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and we do have a higher open on this day, higher open on the NASDAQ as well. Keep in mind that the NASDAQ will be observing its own memorial for Gerald Ford at 11 a.m. Eastern. There will be a moment of silence and a pause in trading at the NASDAQ as well. Now, though, let us go to our market reporters and find the names to know on this December 27th. As we have stocks higher across the board, and we begin with Bob Pisani. He's with me on the big board. Good morning again, Bob.
Good morning, Aaron. Of course, traders down here, and I'd say about a third of the traders were here when Gerald Ford was the president of the United States. And of course, the president had the misfortune of coming in at a very difficult time for the U.S. economy and the U.S. stock market. A brutal bear market in stocks occurred just as he was coming into office, had been going on for a while. Dow went from 1,000 in 1972 to 577. That was the bottom of the market in December 1974, 1 month after President Ford assumed the office after Richard Nixon resigned. We did not get back over 1,000 until 1982. Let's talk a little bit about stocks that are moving here. And by the way, a lot of people here immediately point out that Mr. Ford did lay the groundwork for fighting inflation by bringing in Alan Greenspan into his administration. A lot of people talking about that as well. Here's Toyota Motors right here, and we are waiting for it to open. It will open at the upside, and it will open at a new high, as it did over in Japan. Toyota's chairman Fujio Cho meeting with the Ford CEO Alan Mulally. No discussions about a possible alliance. Now, that's according to Toyota, but the Japanese newspapers are all aflame talking about the possibility that this is the first step in a potential partnership negotiation. Ford's also up about 1.5% in the pre-open. But remember, it's had a tough year. Ford still, even with a move up today, down about 3% on the year. Speaking of Japanese stocks, Nikkei, 7-month high today. Most of the European indexes are within just a percentage point or two from multi-year highs as well. United Healthcare, another investigation into another company, of course, on options. UNH saying the SEC is launching a formal investigation into its option practices. UNH down about 2%. Very mixed year in HMOs this year. Mostly they are to the downside. UNH down, for example, about 14%. And in England, there was a ban announced a short while ago on children's advertising, and they're trying to figure out how it's going to affect people. One study out in Britain's Daily Telegraph says that Burger King could lose as much as $196 million as a result of their inability to advertise directly to children. Let's go over to Scott Wapner. He's standing by over at the NASDAQ.
And Bob, thanks so much. I'm looking at the wall because I'm just watching these Apple losses accelerate as we begin the trading day here. Now down 5.7%. This because reportedly federal prosecutors now looking into whether some of Apple's stock option documents were falsified by company officials. This according to a publication called The Recorder, which says some backdating investigations at Apple could be pursued now as criminal matters. And you see the result right here. Apple down $4.66 as we begin trading. Savvis, meantime, down 3%, even though Kaufman is raising the target to $40 from $34, noting the company's sale of a content delivery network to Level 3. Made a call on this. Still have to get to the bottom of why this stock is trading lower, even though a firm is raising the target there. NVIDIA shares higher by 1% this morning. Thomas Weisel calls it one of its favorite mid-cap stocks. Crucell up 1.5% as well, signing a cross-licensing agreement with Merck. Telek, a big company that was in the news yesterday, down another 1.7% today. Got some negative results from its cancer drug. We told you about that yesterday. 3 more firms downgrading this stock: Thomas Weisel, UBS, and Needham. And finally, First Solar, I'll step out of the way because it is up 2.5% this morning. Piper and First Albany initiating coverage there. Piper outperform. First Albany calls it a buy. And don't forget, E-Trade, leaving the NYSE, comes over back to the NASDAQ today. Let's go to Mary.
Thank you very much, Scott. We are seeing a mixed picture in the energy complex today. Slight gains in heating oil and the RBOB contract for gasoline, but weakness in crude as well as natural gas. Of course, yesterday, forecasts for warmer weather in the Midwest and Northeast caused the energy complex to sell off. Now, typically on Wednesday, as we take a look at a chart of light sweet crude today, we get the inventory data from
purchases, applications, refis. All the 3 major indices dropped rather markedly. And keep in mind, due to holidays, they try to adjust the numbers to smooth them out. That process really sometimes puts the data in a precarious form, and indeed that will be true of all data this week. Now let's go to Aaron Burnett on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
All right, thanks so much, Rick Santelli. I know Rick is eagerly awaiting the housing data. In the meantime, you are likely eagerly awaiting our next guest because Nick Massey is the vice president of the Householder Group, and he is thinking as much as 15,000 in 2007. Find out why. Plus 2006, you could call it the year of metal mania. What is in store for 2007, especially given the recent plunge of one of the most crucial metals on the planet? All that's still to come right here on Squawk on the Street. We'll be right back.
Cnbc.
with great sadness that we report that former President Gerald Ford has died in the form of Nick. Up next, as we mourn the passing of President Ford, we're going to be looking at a seminal moment in his presidency that affected everyone in this city, New York. It's a fascinating story, and it's after this break. President Gerald Ford passed away last night at the age of 93. He inherited a nation and an economy in turmoil back in 1974. In fact, in 1975, with New York City flat on its financial back, President Ford roundly rejected the city's appeal for aid from the federal government, spawning a headline that made history. And here with our story is Mary Thompson.
New York in the 70s, grim and graffiti covered.
You came in from LaGuardia or from Kennedy Airport.
Up next, what is on our radar for the rest of the day. And as we leave you for this break, keep in mind it is a rally on our hands on Wall Street. The Dow is up nearly 75 points. We've got a rally and we'll be back.
You're watching Squawk on the Street on CNBC. First in business worldwide.